joined by Sara Houston as well as Scott Schoefernacker from Protect Our Aquifer. This is a nonprofit water resource advocacy group that is based in Memphis, Tennessee. Scott and Sara, welcome to the Raising Killen podcast.
Glad to be here.
I'm also joined by Sara Smith, and Sara actually is a advocate as well, and she's based in Ripley, Tennessee. Welcome, Sara.
Thanks for having me.
Guys, I'd like to maybe start off with the basics first. And Scott, you are a professional geologist, sir. Can you perhaps explain to us what actually a aquifer is and its significance, especially with our area?
Our aquifer system here in the Mid-South and pretty much throughout the Mississippi embayment is a sand aquifer. So it's basically made up of, looks like beach sand, and it has water in between the actual grains of sand. So it produces a lot of water every day. And, just across Mississippi River in Arkansas, they're pulling about 9 billion gallons a day on average. So throughout, of course, this is more during the growing season, but again, on average, about 9 billion a day. Here in Memphis, we're producing anywhere from 150 to 200 million gallons a day.
Scott, I'm not a scientist, so my layman's brain is going to ask, where does this water come from? How does the water get into the aquifer, and how does the water get out of the aquifer?
So water gets into the aquifer through recharge, infiltration. At some point, this is all precipitation that came down and filtered through the sand grains. Again, I'll use Shelby County as a reference. Rainwater would have fallen, say, near Collierville, their recharge zone, or Fayette County, and has naturally flowed in this direction, and typically takes from 2,000 to 3,000 years for that water to get here. So it takes a long time. It moves very slowly, but there are areas where we have younger water, and for the most part, again, the system flows naturally. If you want to think of the embayment, it's kind of like a bowl shape, and it's layers of clay and sand stacked on top of each other, 3,000 feet deep beneath Memphis. And basically that water flows towards the Mississippi River from each side of the river, and then starts heading down towards the Gulf Coast. So that's one way the water comes in, moves out of the system, and the other way is through extracting through pumps that we put into the aquifer system and extract the water for whether it be irrigation, water coming out of your tap, industrial use, and that sorts. And also, the way the water leaves the system is through our rivers. So when it's not raining it's starting to be the dry season here, then it goes into September and we still see water in our streams. That's because the aquifer system is feeding into these river systems. So that's another way that it exits out.
Sara, what is the origin story of Protect Our Aquifer? How did this come about? How did this agency start?
Yes, absolutely. And you just gave us a promotion calling us an agency. We're actually a nonprofit, but we say that common sense is our authority. So we've been around for about 10 years, and we were actually started in late 2016 when Tennessee Valley Authority, that generates all of our electricity, they were getting ready to decommission their coal plant where they were burning coal for our electricity in Southwest Memphis. And they were building a gas plant. And across the street from these unlined coal ash pits, they were building this new gas plant, and they realized they needed a lot cleaner water than what they were using at the coal plant. And instead of using recycled wastewater, which they had originally said they would, they drilled 5 wells deep into the aquifer right across the street from this known toxic coal ash. And so Sierra Club actually caught wind of this, and they tried to stop it. They tried to intervene on the permits, and they tried to sue, but they got thrown out, not being local, technically based in California. And so our founder, Ward Archer, He's been, kind of an activist for a long time and had been really interested in the aquifer. And he was kind of called up and said, hey, would you, be willing to start a nonprofit just real quick? It'll be a short fight. Like, we just need to, stop these wells. We'll protect the aquifer. The job will be done. And so that's kind of how we started, was really thinking about like the aquifer as a single issue. And that effort alone took about 2 years. We actually did win, though. It was common sense once again proved that, if they were to pump all this water across the street, they could have pulled down, toxic coal ash towards the drinking water supply. And so we won that. But in that 2-year span, our founding board realized, like, wow, this aquifer is huge. It provides our drinking water supply, and no one's in charge of it. And so that kind of began the formation of what is now Protect Our Aquifer, with staff and programs. But at first it was just passionate community members that were ready to get something done, and we won, and then we just kept on winning.
So how big is the aquifer? Like, do we know where all it spans? Because of course I'm an hour north of Shelby County.
Mm-hmm. And we do. And you're on the aquifer, Sarah.
Good to know, because
yes,
I was called an advocate, but I really just, I've always been an animal advocate. And then when and political, like, I always want people to be, informed.
Mm-hmm.
But then I kind of got thrown into this when people were like, hey, you know how to find answers to questions. Are we getting a data center? And so I don't know anything about the aquifer. I've lived here my whole life pretty much, and I don't know anything about it. Didn't know that we were connected to it. I've heard, on the news about the fight to protect it and stuff, but I didn't know anything like up here for it.
Yeah. No, it's a great question, Sarah. So, I mean, the aquifer really spans parts of 8 states. Like, it's humongous. Now, where we are in West Tennessee, pretty much like where you, Sarah, and all the way up to Dyersburg, like, this is like the thickest part of the aquifer. So we're all using that same water. Our neighbors in northern Mississippi, eastern Arkansas, like, they're pretty much everybody's getting their drinking water from underground. When you start to go closer, when you go east, like towards the Tennessee River, it kind of starts to pinch out. So the folks that are in that kind of the counties along the Tennessee River border, like, they're mostly going to be on like surface water, maybe some aquifer water, but the Memphis Sand Aquifer, the good stuff, that's really pretty much along the Mississippi River, all the way from, Tennessee Mississippi border all the way up into northern Kentucky, and then a little bit across the river in Arkansas, and then down into Mississippi. So it's big, but we all sit above the thickest part of it, and that's where drinking water, industrial water, agricultural water, like, everybody's using this resource.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Yeah. And, Scott kind of mentioned it, but, it moves really, really slowly because we have this sand aquifer and not like, a rocky karst aquifer. So, I mean, you really haven't had to think much about it because it stayed clean for so long. Some of the contamination issues we see here in Memphis are only because we have so many major users and it pumps so much that we've seen this kind of draw down, this contamination start to show up in the close to the water supply that we don't want it to be. Whereas, in Ripley, like, smaller amount of usage, but if there was the same level of pumping happening someday, like, y'all could see some of the issues we see today. And a big part of our organization is like, how do you get in front of that? Like, how do you be proactive instead of always waiting for the crisis or waiting to be, reactive? And unfortunately, Memphis and Shelby County, just because the way we've grown and, the 100 years of use, we're kind of playing catch up, but it's like, hey, we could do better. We can do better.
Yes. No better, do better.
Yeah.
Data centers that's a really hot button topic right now. And I just would like you guys' feedback. Are the data centers a heavy draw on our power grid as well as our water resources? Can we please ask you guys to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, and it depends on the size of the data center. There's all different, smaller ones are 5 megawatt, 15 or whatever. And then you get to the larger ones like XAI, where they could be using 150 megawatt to 300 megawatts, and even more. So, and to generate power typically takes water. So you have thermoelectric, and that's a large water use. So that's, again, one way that it's using water, and as well the water demand to actually cool the computer systems. Again, it's usually done by like either a closed loop system, which is a little bit more water friendly, less water use, and then there's evaporative cooling, which can use a considerable amount of water. So again, it just depends on what type of facility is built and how they cool their system, and what the demand is, and whether the electrical cooperative or company or utility that's there can supply that amount of power, and also the water utility meet that demand that is being required by that facility. So it just depends. And then a lot of times, since y'all are outside of Shelby County, they can pretty much just drill a well and start pumping water out of the aquifer system. So they just got to get a well driller and file with the state, and they can pump the water. All they have to do is pay for electricity for that water. So
they, in the city meetings that we've had, that I've went over the minutes with, they claim that the only water that this proposed one will use is like, their kitchen, their toilets, and everything else will be minimal because they'll use glycol for cooling. In all of my research, it's hit or miss on if that truly is low water usage or not. And so I'm assuming that would be like the closed loop cooling system, which you said would be less. But is it still concerning is my thing? Because, of course, the multi-billion dollar company is saying it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And we're nervous. We have a 1-year moratorium, so I have 1 year to
figure it out
as I can.
Yeah,
and explain to everybody that a regular old 15-watt data center is different than the Bitcoin mining and the AI and all of that stuff. Because that's a big battle that I have, is educating my city alderman, well, not my city alderman, but the city alderman of this city that is getting proposed this, that your email isn't running off of, I mean, it could, but it hasn't been historically for the last however long internet has existed. And this is different.
Yeah. Right. And
yeah,
I can speak on this, like the propylene glycol. It's the closed loop system. So, okay. One of the things that, like Scott's kind of laying out and what you've been on too, is that, a lot of this is like fact finding, searching, you just gotta piece this all together. It's not readily available by the company, the Chamber of Commerce or whoever might have recruited the company, are they willing to share the information, or is it the other way around? The company's trying to find their way into the community. It's really challenging to find all this information. So, kudos to you for, getting that moratorium passed, just to buy yourself some time to get that stuff figured out. And that's what we're actually trying to do here in Memphis right now, is, we've been dealing with XAI. We've been dealing with these massive, like you said, like they're different than like a little small data centers. We have St. Jude here that has a data center. Like, we don't want to fight St. Jude's, need to compute scientific cancer studies, but we do want to be very thoughtful about like these supercomputers that are just taking up so much energy and power and water. And so going back to your closed loop thing, from a basic like water demand standpoint, if they're saying they're using closed loop cooling, that is good.
Okay.
But the caveat being that, using propylene glycol is a chemical. It's got, all kinds of goodies in there you don't want to drink, you don't want to interact with your surface water. So then the next question is, what's your maintenance plan? What's the discharge going to be? Are you going to have a permit to discharge this? Are you going to be treating this before you like release this? Because propylene glycol, you don't want that in the environment. You don't want that in your streams. You don't want that going to your wastewater treatment plants. And if it leaks, What do you do if it leaks? So then you start to have, okay, here's phase 1 of questions. Now we're going into phase 2 of stuff. And so that's something that we're actively learning a lot about, those closed loop systems and like what other materials or whatever chemical compounds could be in those. And one of concern is anything that has like PFAS or forever chemicals in it. Like, we want to try and limit the use of those as much as possible. And so, one of the things that in Memphis that was the promise at the start when it comes to water, and we're still waiting for it to happen, is a wastewater recycling facility. So because the data center was going to be next door to our city's wastewater plant, but we're going to build a whole new facility that's going to recycle the wastewater, clean it up enough to be good to use in our supercomputer, and it's going to be a win for the aquifer, it's going to be a win for the community, and it's going to be a win for us. We're going to get our water. We don't have to worry about buying it from, our utility MLDW. Well, that was over 2 years ago. There's been construction pauses, delays, a lot of this like secrecy of like, how do we get information about what's going on? And a big caveat with that is our Chamber of Commerce and our mayor that did the deal to get XAI here, they never got a community benefits agreement or a signed binding agreement requiring that facility. If they would have gotten that, we'd be in a different situation right now. Instead, it was a verbal promise, it was a handshake agreement, and it's been, how do we community police this thing into like coming to fruition? But with all that, it's a big, long gobbledygook stuff. I'm sure questions will come out of that. But one like takeaway from that is, if you can find alternative water sources instead of the drinking water supply, could you use, a river? Could you use the like a wastewater plant instead of the drinking water supply?
Yeah, unfortunately, where this is going to go, if the company doesn't leave now that we've got the moratorium, it butts up to a low-income housing neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And then it's very close to the county line, and it's on the opposite end of the county from the Mississippi River. So there is no alternative. I doubt there's an alternative for them for getting the water. That community agreement part, I'm glad you brought that up because I plan to show this recording to our city people. I invited them, but they didn't respond. They haven't given anything. They haven't answered any of the questions that the city has already asked. They've sent the person from our power company that is wanting them to come in, and he's presented all of this stuff, and I think that a lawyer maybe presented some stuff, but it's not clear who that lawyer was with, because this was before I ever even knew that the data center was being brought in or whatever. And they have not given anything in writing, even after the city has demanded it, which I think is part of the reason that the city passed this moratorium, is because, like, okay, not only are our citizens saying, hang on, we don't necessarily want this, but also they're already not answering. Now, they do already own a small building, but what the moratorium is on is selling them 120 more acres, which tells me that they want to build a bigger AI center, because the business that's doing the Bitcoin is also switching over to AI, which is what I'm like. Yes, it's an industrial area, but it butts up to a highly populated residential area, and I think is less than 2 miles from the elementary school. So air pollution, ground pollution, the PFAS, like there was just a whole big scare about diapers and stuff with PFAS. And then now we could potentially have that in our ground less than 2 miles from our primary school, I believe, and 2 miles from our elementary school. So, like, that's a big concern for sure. And I would say that needs to be in a legally binding, like, this is how it's going to be handled kind of thing, if they're going to go forward with it. So I wrote that down. In my notes.
Yeah, and I'll put a link in the chat, but for your podcast listeners, I can share it with y'all, and y'all, if there's somewhere you want to post. But there's we worked with our partners on a community benefits ordinance last year. Again, these data centers were already here, so y'all are kind of y'all are ahead of us. We got them before we had a say. But one of the things that our partners, worked on passing was this community benefits ordinance where 25% of the tax revenue has to go to the affected communities, a 5-mile radius around the facility. And a big part of that too was getting like a community board set up to actually direct how the money would be spent. And so, we actually wanted it to be 75% of the tax revenue, but, we got 25. So we're going to keep pushing. But there is a whole resource hub that our partners at Young, Gifted, and Green created that kind of is really just supposed to be that, just a resource hub that's really helpful for communities like y'all that are really trying to figure this out and like, what are these best practices? What are these things you can do? And so I'll drop that in the chat, but just for y'all, this is open to anybody to use and make it your own, but it really does create like some kind of guaranteed community benefit and role, especially when we're talking about money. Like, get the money to the people. We don't want this trickle down economic stuff. Like, this really needs to be, how do we make sure it's benefiting the community?
And a lot of the people that I've seen, like in our Facebook comments and everything, they've said, like, I'm not necessarily against it, but I also don't want to risk it if it's just going to make the more wealthy people more wealthy and it's going to only harm our community, which is my big thing. Like, if it's going to bring Lauderdale County out of poverty, then let's do some work and let's do some protections. But if it's just going to use our resources and make millionaires billionaires and drink our water and poison our land, there's good hunting land around there, and my community is big on that. So it's like, if you poison the animals, then what are you doing here?
Yep.
So I will definitely check that link out.
And I think that just gets at the core of why you get engaged on this issue. It's like, if you don't get engaged, it's going to be what you said. There's going to be the benefits are going towards the business owners, the corporations, it's going to go, top down. If we get involved and we lay the playing field and we set the standards, we have a lot more power. We get the benefits. And that's the challenge of this moment right now, is like, if we do step up, it could be beneficial. I'm not saying they're all going to be like amazing for us, don't get me wrong, but like, how do you negotiate something out of it? Or the ones that really don't want to jump through the hoops and don't want to find the water efficiencies and don't want to do renewable energy and don't want to do this stuff,
go somewhere else.
Then they don't come here. Great.
Otherwise we'll make lemonade.
Bye.
Scott, Sarah, I'm not sure who would like to take this question, but it deals with regulation, right? So federally, we have the EPA, then that filters down to state level where we have TDEC. And they are the guys that do the protection and regulation around our WHPP, our wellhead protection plan. Can you kind of tell us what that is? And where do we go to find that kind of information out?
Public water supply system. But the funny thing about these wellhead protection plans, so these are federally required, comes down from the EPA. Right. It's written in the law, and that each public water system has to submit a wellhead protection plan, pulling groundwater, obviously. So what this does is it designates areas around the wellhead. And when I say wellhead, it's the actual production well. So you have a zone 1 that's just typically a radius, depending on how big and how much water you pull out of the ground. And then the zone 2, which is a larger area based on groundwater time of travel, typically for the larger utilities. So it has to be at least 10 years time of travel. But some, like Memphis Light, Gas, and Water, do 40-year time of travel, and other larger utilities in Shelby County. So, but it's basically taking an inventory of what's around the well fields, potential contaminant sources. They do contaminant source inventory. So every public water supply system has one. They're on file. They vary from size to size based on how much water you pull. and basically it's the basic level of protection that's there. So typically they want to protect around the wellhead just in case somebody spills. There's a release, and that can be pulled down the annulus of the well and like the sides of the well into the screen sometimes if it's broken. But it's, again, they try to protect as much as they can. Zone 2, there's a little bit less protection. However, we have developed in Shelby County what's called wellhead protection overlay districts, which is more of a zoning ordinance overlay district that has a little bit more teeth, and it can be made however the county or municipality wants to make it a little bit more protective, limit what's within their well fields. So not many have it outside of Shelby County. The Mega Site Authority out there near Stanton and Haywood County, they actually put one in place on the whole entire property that they have. But again, it's limited to their boundaries, which is still, gosh, how big is that? Like 4,600 acres, something like that. It's pretty big. But they have 7 production wells, and once they're up to speed and pulling water, they're going to be around 5 million gallons a day, and they have a capacity to pull 7 million if they need to.
So Sara is in Ripley, right? And so now Ripley has a moratorium in place. I'm in Dyersburg. So far, there doesn't seem to be anything kind of going on. Now, our county did have a zoning meeting, and the Planning Commission kind of put a proposal forward as to protections that need to be in place, right? So for those listeners out there that don't have a data center yet in their community, but want to make sure that, hey, people, we need to do our research. What can be done in the meantime to kind of be sure to be proactive and get the research done before these guys show up?
Part of that would be to understand how big the facility is. And again, what their processes are and how they're going to be cooling the computer systems and how much power they're going to be requiring. Are they going to be installing their own well? How much water are they going to be using? Are there any other wells nearby that may be impacted? So say they're going to sink a couple wells in the aquifer and they want to pump out 1 million gallons a day. Are there nearby domestic wells that may be impacted where there's maybe some drawdown to where it lowers the water level, and will that impact the neighbor's well? So that's kind of the one thing. And then as far as contamination is kind of mixed for me, because there's other everyday contaminant sources like gas stations and dry cleaner facilities and stuff like that, where you have a higher chance of releases because you have actual product like gasoline and underground storage tanks. Old dry cleaners didn't have the best practices. Sometimes they would dump chlorinated solvents down a drain or out the back door. Not so much anymore, but again, those are kind of concerns. But if how are they, if they do have any wastewater produced from the facility? Some do, some have permits, some just go straight to the sewer system. What will they be releasing to the sewer system? Can they handle it? And then are they able to clean it up? And if not, will they have a, discharge permit, like a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, NPDES permit, kind of regulating what's going to the stream. So this is a little kind of nerdy answer, but like it just depends on what's there, what's around it, who's around it. Yeah, because it's going to be an immediate impact, if anything, rather than a regional impact. I don't know, Sara, if you have anything you want to add.
Well, I think the only thing to add really is just like putting this information into practice when it comes to like how you get this information. And like what Scott's describing is like it could come, you could go through a wastewater permitting process, MPDS discharge process. You might have to do records requests to, TDEC or the zoning land use people. Like there's so many different like sources of information, and that's really where you're going to start to understand like what these impacts like could be. And if you don't have a data center specific ordinance, it's all going to be scattered. And if you have something where it is directed more, it's like, okay, this is like they have to file this information, or this is all going to be in one place. Otherwise, what Scott's describing is like there's so many different potential impacts the data centers can have to our land and water resources, but you got to go on a wild goose chase to like track it down.
That's something that my county, it's small and big at the same time, I guess. Big land wise, small people wise. It's a goose chase. It's a chicken with your head cut off every time you have to find something, and you've got to no email for this person. Oh, there's a phone, but there's no voicemail. It's it's just a constant dig. You got to be an FBI agent to find something. So I'm just gonna have to take to social media because I'm gonna have to just get on y'all about this. So you were saying something about like a little bit of a nerdy answer on the discharging into the sewer and stuff. And I'm glad that you said that because that reminded me that the city of Ripley and Ripley Power and Light are on a sewer system. I'm in the county, so I'm not on a sewer system.
Right.
If they discharge their glycol for some reason, like I read a story in Nevada, I think, where a Meta one discharged something and they had to shut their whole water system down because it like put some poison into it, something. If they did use our sewer system and they put out whatever from their cooling system, in layman's terms, the junk, would that potentially harm everybody on that system?
Again, it's just whatever is in,
depending on what it is,
what's in the stuff, the junk. It could be a whole. It could be the glycol. It could be other proprietary stuff, but that's the things that the wastewater treatment plant has to understand what's in it, so they can see if they need to change their process. And that's the big question. So it's almost like, to be better prepared would be to have a list of questions and things that they need to submit to whatever planning commission or whatever, and somebody pulls it all together. And so you're not trying to dig through TDEC's data viewers and the county records and stuff like that. It's just all there to be like, we're gonna use this amount of water, we're gonna be pulling water from say the city of Ripley, and then we're going to discharge to the wastewater, and this is what our discharge effluent is going to be. Just have that record so you know what's there and the quantities that are going to be needed and how much power. Because, a lot of these places just find a train, like a substation, and then like, we're going to put it there, and because they can get power there. So, but every utility should be doing an impact study, just like that's required, right? You got to figure out if you have enough power, if you have enough water to supply. Do you need to install more production wells? Are they going to put in production wells to supply the water? So, like, again, Shelby County, we have the Shelby County Groundwater Quality Control Board that permits wells. So anything that pumps above 250 gallons gets automatically flagged and reviewed. And then, so that would be something like a data center. So do you all need to start your own groundwater quality control board to kind of look at this and be kind of another layer of a check where, like, it's not going to stop. It may not stop them necessarily, but it's another step
to protect the citizens.
To protect the citizens.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's my big thing is, and I'm writing down questions as y'all are talking
Yeah.
questions to present to the city, to the people who would make the decisions to create boards and create this and that and the other, because like they all have jobs too. They're not this
Yeah, right.
most of them commissioning is not their full-time job. So
it's a civic duty.
yes, so I am doing my civic duty and doing the research for them.
Yeah.
So that I can present it with them so that they can ask questions, because most of them, I mean, I would have never thought, oh, are you going to be pumping PFAS into our sewer system? I wouldn't have asked that. So definitely writing all of this down, and I'll have to clean it up later.
And PFAS is like, PFAS is becoming a bigger issue, especially in West Tennessee. So TDEC, the state agency, actually sampled all the production wells and all the surface water intakes throughout the state over the past 2-3 years. And the data that's coming back, well, some systems are clean and don't see any detections of it. Others, especially around y'all's area, and places where it's confined, where you wouldn't expect to see this stuff, you see traces of it. It's not above any regulatory limits, but it's there, and it shouldn't be there, because PFAS was really started to be generated after World War II in the 1940s. So that means that the water that's in the aquifer that's supposed to be, couple 2,000-3,000 years old, there's traces of stuff that's been around for less than, how long has it been? 80 years. So that shows that there's a connection somewhere. So like that, y'all aren't immune, just like we're not. So just like this is the one great water source that we have. So it's up to y'all to figure out how to protect it.
Yeah.
Talking about figuring out how to protect it, you guys have some amazing events and resources that are in play. Scott or Sara, would you all mind telling us about Water Warriors and some of the tours that y'all have and all the good stuff?
I'll let Sara do her spiel.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, what you're saying, Sara, like, you've lived on top of this aquifer your whole life. You got water, it comes out of your tap, and it's like, wait, what's really going on? And that's been a big part of like the Protect Our Aquifer like journey of like, hey, like how do we really get people to play the role that they can play when it comes to making sure we have clean drinking water. Like that looks like so many different things. And the core part of it starts with education. I mean, that was just one of the biggest things. We have this amazing drinking water source, and it's completely underground. It is out of sight. It is out of mind. We can't go visit it. It's just like it's down there and stuff's going on. So one of the programs we've started is called the Water Warriors Training, and we're in our, this is coming up to be our 4th cohort, our 4th year doing it. And it's a 10-week program where once a week for about 2 hours a week, everybody comes together and we pay everybody $100 a session to come nerd out really hard with us about hydrogeology and land use and zoning. And, we'll talk about who's got the power, the regulatory environment. We'll go into like remediation reports, all kinds of stuff. And so it's kind of spaced out over the 10-week span. And then we also have a project grant at the end of it. So after the 10 weeks, the group can work on a project together, and then we'll have funds available for them to do that. And so like one of the groups, they did the Aquifer at Juneteenth. So they all like had like edible aquifer station for kids, but then they did like toxic tours and, all kinds of cool little hands-on things. Like that was just, like a weekend thing. We've had one group or one woman in our first cohort. She wanted to take soil and water samples in her neighborhood around like a known historically polluted site. And then she had a community meeting and told everybody about it and let folks know like if it was safe to plant in their garden to eat vegetables, like that kind of thing. So that Water Warriors program is super fun. If there are any listeners in the Memphis, Shelby County area, applications are open now. So they're going until September 8th. It's really fun. And so that's something where we're trying to, like, as we grow, how do we adapt that program to the needs of, other parts of West Tennessee and the recharge zone. So that's a fun one that we do. What else do we do, Scott? All kinds of fun stuff.
We got the Water Wednesday happy hour coming up.
Yeah. Marsh, what is this?
Millington.
When is this going out?
It's,
Huh?
I think on Wednesday. I was like, man, I wish I could have been there, but it looks like on Wednesday at Huey's.
Yes, if anybody's listening and it's not Wednesday at 7 p.m. yet, book it to Millington and Huey's, or Huey's and Millington, and we're going to be there from 4 to 7. And that's like a quarterly series we started last year that's really just like, it's a happy hour. POA pays for your first drink, apps are on us, and just to like a low stakes way to get folks together, just to like, learn together, ask questions together, and just be like, hey, we're all like-minded in some way, like what brought you here? And just kind of a low entry way to just get folks like thinking about our water, meet new friends. And we usually have a guest speaker. And so it's a really informal, like 15-minute little talk or so. So we're having the Millington City Administrator be our speaker this time. And he's also the newest member of the Groundwater Board that we have here in Shelby County. So he's real gung-ho and trying to like learn a lot, and like kind of he's on the, I don't know, I'm excited for him. He's like really trying to think through like some real change and actions. I'm like, yes, finally.
Yes, that's great. And we have, not to talk down on anybody older, but we have one younger gentleman on our city board that he was one of my students. So, and he's a great guy. But I'm hoping that he can help energize the other aldermen to really, get into this. Yes, it's new age stuff, but we can learn new tricks.
Yeah. And I mean, that's such a good point too. And also like having, when you're dealing with these types of like councils and commissions and boards, like, there's like the formal chair that's going to be like the leader, but then it's really about like folks that are passionate, that like want to go above and beyond or want to take that role. And so they don't necessarily have to be like the chair to be engaged and to be doing stuff. And, especially in like, I mean, even in Shelby County, we're the humongous city, but it's still like these are part-time positions. These folks have other jobs, like they're not going to be, experts in the aquifer. Like that's what we're here for. And they also aren't, thinking of all these questions. And so Sara's coming up with all these questions to bring. Like I think one of the important and interesting things about the data center pushback right now is like people are like understanding how to get engaged with like just the democratic process. Like it's great to vote, like go do your civic duty, but then it's like those people you've elected are now making decisions every week. Like
Yes.
What are they deciding? Like what are they doing? Stick with them, like they need to hear from you.
Yes, and that's something that my county has, well, I mean, the whole state of Tennessee has a low voter turnout, and then it's an even lower engagement in actual, like, day to day. Like, I've volunteered with my animal shelter since I was 18 years old. So, like, I have a little bit of, like, I know who to call. I know how to go to the mayor's office and be like, hey, I sent you an email and you didn't respond, so now I'm at your door. Like, which we're on a better relationship now. But, it's been a long time of me learning how to get into this stuff, and still, like, with this is a whole different side, because with the animal stuff, that's totally different than the people stuff. So I'm glad to do this and, like, send it out to the other people that are like, I'm willing to learn, but I don't have time. Like, I'm saying, my mom, not that I have a lot of time because I homeschool, but like we're I'm working on it. So I'm glad to be engaging a little bit more and hoping to motivate more people in my community to engage and be involved, and not just say, well, I voted 2 years ago and that was good enough for me.
Guys, thank you so much for taking the time to speak today. This has been super fun. And I mean, y'all just given us a whole lot to think about, a whole lot of information to take back to our communities as well. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thanks for the work
thank you.
y'all are doing. Well, I'm inspired.
And I followed Protect Our Aquifer on Facebook, so
Yay!
I'll be keeping up and sharing things. And
Awesome.
Unfortunately, I can't make it to Huey's. I love Huey's. But I will definitely be following along, and I really appreciate all of the information.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great work you're doing, and thanks for, fighting the good fight, and appreciate the opportunity.